Hello and welcome to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Over the next 60 minutes, we'll be bringing you some of the very best interviews and reports from the past week of coverage on Monocle Radio, with highlights from our studios here at Midori House and from around the world. On today's show, we'll reflect on the life of the primatologist Jane Goodall, who died this week, aged 91.
There's two Janes, there's me, and then there's this icon out there which is really being created by the Discovery Channel, and I have to try and live up to that reputation. You know, I thought about it a lot, and I realized that although it's not very comfortable, it's important.
Plus, the morning show's Karen Pittman reviews what it's like to play top television producer Mia Jordan and what we can expect from her character in the latest series.
In season 4, we see a turn in her where she decides that she is going to be more ruthlessly for herself. After having handed herself over to the company, she decided to take herself back.
All that and much, much more in the next hour, here on The Curator, with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We begin today's show with the sad news of the passing of the primatologist Dame Jane Goodall, who died this week at the age of 91. Goodall, who spent much of her career researching our closest known human relatives, was praised for shedding light on human life through her study of chimpanzees. Here, Monocle's Andrew Muller looks back on her life.
Coming directly from there to here, but of course my real field of expertise lies in an even different kind of civilization. I can't really call it a civilization, a different way of life from a different being.
It seems, in retrospect, obvious. Convention upending theories often do. Centuries of naturalists had observed wildlife, even the wildlife most closely related to humans, as substantially insentient creatures operating on instinct and reflex, one animal of a given species much like the next. It seems incredible that this assumption persisted so long, had none of these people met dogs, which, aside from a common interest in biscuits, are noticeably divergent characters. It is telling that the contradiction, when it arrived, was posited by someone who her times had granted little option but to be an outsider. Valerie Jane Morris Goodall was born on April 3, 1934, in London. In later life, possibly not entirely seriously, she was fond of ascribing her fascination with animals to a gift her father gave her as a child, a soft toy chimpanzee, which she called Jubilee. Encouraging though her parents were, by the time Goodall reached adulthood in the 1950s, the prospects of a young woman from England pursuing a career studying primates in Africa were broadly comparable with her chances of travelling to the moon. Goodall was lucky in being invited in 1957 to visit the Kenya farm owned by a school friend's parents, but she made the most of it, impressing the paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey sufficiently that he engaged her as a researcher. Goodall returned to Africa in 1960 to Gombe, on the western lake shore of what was then the British colonial territory of Tanganyika, shortly to become the Republic of Tanzania. In deference to the concerns of local authorities, she was accompanied by her mother.
I went to Africa because my dream, when I was 10, was to go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. I mean, women didn't, you didn't have women scientists back then, not in that sort of life. And everybody said, dream about something you can achieve. But my mother said, if you really want something, you're going to have to work extremely hard, take advantage of opportunity, but don't give up.
Goodall didn't so much study Gombe's chimpanzees as move in with them. She understood them as individuals with distinctive personalities. Rather than recording them as numbers, she gave them names: David Greybeard, Flint, Goliath, Passion, Frodo, and Fifi. Goodall noted that they were capable of expressing and experiencing emotions, joy, sorrow, anticipation, bereavement. She observed them making and using tools and hunting other animals, all of which was news to the field of primatology, as was the idea that chimpanzees engage in methodical violence.
Chimpanzees have been seen drinking from natural water bowls in Uganda, but on those instances they merely dipped their fingers into the water and licked off the drops. The exciting fact in the Gombe stream area is that the chimpanzee by initially crumpling the leaves into a sponge, is in fact making a tool.
Goodall's 1990 memoir, Through a Window, My 30 Years with the Chimpanzees of Gombe, would later recall a 4-year conflict between two troops of chimps during the mid-1970s. In 1962, the University of Cambridge, correctly impressed, admitted her as a PhD candidate despite her lack, at that time, of a degree. In 1965, Goodall established the Gombe Stream Research Centre to train students interested in primatology and ecology. The area in which she'd been studying became the Gombe Stream National Park in 1968. The Jane Goodall Institute, an environment and conservation NGO based in Washington, D.C., was established in 1977. Goodall was heavily laden with awards, trophies and baubles. In 2002, the UN named her a Messenger of Peace. She was knighted by the UK in 2004 and awarded the Legion of Honour by France in 2006 and presented with honorary degrees running into the dozens. She was also less formally, if no less affectionately, acknowledged in popular culture. One of Gary Larson's Far Side cartoons deployed her as the punchline. Lego created a tribute kit. A 2001 episode of The Simpsons featured an extremely thinly disguised primatologist called Joan Bushwell.
Every day I get up at 5:30, watch the chimps, eat a quick lunch of roots and water, then more chimp watching. After dark, I come home and think about chimps until it's time for bed.
You must be the most boring woman on earth.
Possibly, but...
19 seasons later, Goodall appeared as herself.
See you soon.
Wait, come back. Take me with you. I want a life exactly like yours.
Well, so do hundreds of others. But still, you might get lucky if you work really hard and get a doctorate.
Would you give me a scholarship?
No, you'd have to save up, like I did.
Then there's a slight chance you'll have me?
Well, very slight, but don't give up.
That is the most encouraging thing I have ever heard.
She married twice, to the Dutch filmmaker and aristocrat Baron Hugo van Lauwert and to the Tanzanian MP and National Parks Director Derek Bryson. Well into old age, Goodall remained an indefatigable traveller, speaker and advocate, regularly on the road more than 300 days a year. In 2018, Goodall was a guest on Monocle 24's The Big Interview. It wasn't easy to think of a question she hadn't been asked before, but I think we managed. Once you get hold of the idea that animals have personalities and they have temperaments and they have moods, with chimpanzees in particular, that obviously means there's going to be differences between different animals. Has there ever been, or is there ever, examples of you encountering a chimpanzee you just don't like?
Yes. Absolutely. I absolutely didn't like Passion. She was a terrible mother, and she cannibalized 3 infants, probably 10 altogether, other people's infants. And she was a terrible mother to her own, at least for the first 2. And I can't say I like Frodo, this big bully. He bullied other chimps, but he bullied researchers, and particularly me. You can't really like somebody who's always stamping on you and dragging you and could kill you like that, so he didn't want to. I mean, he could have killed any of us, but it was just bravado, showing off. You know, I'm dominant. And I kept thinking, Frodo, I know you're stronger than me. I know you're dominant. I completely agree. Please leave me alone.
Jane Goodall was, as an intermediary between humankind and the natural world, easily as important as such environmental advocates as Sir David Attenborough and Jacques Cousteau, and performed singular service as an interpreter who enabled humans to better understand our closest relatives.
There's 2 Janes. There's me, and then there's this icon out there which has really been created by the Geographic and Discovery Channel, and I have to try and live up to that reputation. You know, I thought about it a lot, and I realized that although it's not very comfortable, it's important, and I'll make use of it.
For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Thanks, Andrew. And to hear the full interview of Jane Goodall, just head to our archive at monocle.com/radio. Stay in the animal kingdom, as this week also saw the results of the annual competition known as Fat Bear Week in Alaska's Katmai National Park. a competition that pits brown bear against brown bear, who are really trying to just mind their own business and bulk up by eating salmon ahead of their winter hibernation, but instead have the world's prying eyes judging them from webcams and voting on their girth and beauty. And who better to tell us about who won this year's Fat Bear Beauty Contest than Monocle's Bear Desk Chief, Laura Kramer. Laura joined Chris Chamak on Wednesday's edition of The Briefing with more.
The merely chubby have been removed, and we have a new monarch of Brooks River, as you mentioned. It's the annual bracket-style competition that pits different wild bears against each other, and the public were left with a true clash of the titans because these competitors, Chris, they looked like massive, fluffy bowling balls with ears, and it was a competition that attracted more than 1.5 million votes, more than ever before. And the winner is Chunk. Yes, with almost 100,000 votes, Chunk won. It's his first title.
It's his first title, and you do have to toot your own horn a little bit here, Laura. Did you predict this one as you did last year's?
In fact, I did. I did predict it. It's a gift. What can I say? I messaged our deputy head of radio and the producer of this program, Tom Webb, late last night with my prediction, and so it is all written down, so it is official. Let me tell you a little bit about
anyone
Chunk.
Wondering, there is a written record of this prediction.
I am a serious journalist after all. Now, Chunk is known as the most dominant brown bear of the river. He won the fatness competition despite the fact that he suffered from most of the season, really, with a potentially fatal broken jaw. We don't know exactly how the injury happened, but locals predict that it was probably a fight over another female with another male. Now, despite this, he pushed through. And as we know, in sports and competition, the people love an underdog story. We want to see champions who triumph over adversity. It makes us feel like we can overcome our own struggles, doesn't it? And what's more compelling to the audience than the ultimate battle, which is for survival?
It certainly does, but I mean, I hate to be the nitpicker here, Laura, but does this suggest that maybe, just maybe, this isn't about the science of the actual fattest bear? It's a little more about, who captures our hearts?
A popularity contest? Yes, of course. These are wild bears, Chris. You can't just go up and weigh them. You'd become part of the diet rather than the salmon. So yeah, it's all based on before and after photos of the bears, of their weight gain as they prepare for winter, as well, I should say, as their personalities, because, people get quite attached to them. They gain about 4 pounds a day during this. So that's just under 2 kilograms as it's all happening. And there's a live stream on the website and people get very defensive about who they want to see as the official fat bear of the year. There's also some controversy because some bears didn't have names. So Chunk did. He's one of them. Some of them just go by numbers. And you have to imagine there are about 2,200 brown bears in this park. So it'd be a really big task to name them all. But they think it's unfair because if you've got a name versus a number, people are naturally going to go. And there was one that the people really liked, which was Flotato was his name. He didn't fare very well. But there you go. There's controversy around that.
I get this. I know it's like Bear 856, I believe, was in the final. That's not quite as exciting, but did beat last year's champion Grazer. A little bit of an ode to Grazer. It was the last female bear left in the competition.
Yes, that's right. Returning champion Grazer was kicked out in the semis. As you mentioned, last female bear standing this year. And, after some back-to-back wins, I think people wanted to see a new champion take it. And I'll have you know, there's quite some controversy here because Grazer and Chunk actually have history. He killed one of her cubs last year. And
oh my.
Yeah, due to all the cameras, it was all caught on the live stream and people were very mad about it. And they say, it probably helped Grazer win last year. The sympathy vote really helped. And so there was actually some resentment this time around. Many people refused to vote for Chunk because of that. In solidarity with Grazer, somebody tweeted, "If you vote for Chunk, you are a fascist." So people take it very seriously. It makes Chunk's win that much more dramatic, I think, from villain to flab champ.
and it does bring us back to my opening because then there is a link to the Cubs. You didn't take it all to my baseball reference of the Chicago Cubs at the top of this bit.
As a long-suffering Cubs fan, we have to take what we can get, Chris. It's not a great existence for us always.
Laura Kramer there, Monocle Radio's senior producer, in conversation with Chris Chamak earlier this week. From Bear Week in Alaska to the 20th edition of New Zealand's Bird of the Year, now for our next highlight. The karearea, New Zealand's only falcon and the country's fastest bird, has just been crowned Bird of the Year. The contest has become a much-loved fixture, attracting a record 75,000 votes and a good dose of memes, posters, and campaign debates. But beyond the fun, it's a serious reminder. The karearea is at risk, with as few as 5,000 left, and most of New Zealand's native birds are in trouble. On Tuesday's episode of The Globalist, Monocle's Georgina Godwin was joined by Stephen Moss, naturalist and the author of 10 Birds That Changed the World. Georgina began by asking Stephen why this year's winner had captured the public imagination.
I think mainly because, as you said, New Zealand birds, endemic birds, and particularly birds that are only found in New Zealand, are really in trouble. And this beautiful bird is also known as the New Zealand falcon. It's the only falcon in New Zealand. You know, we have kestrels, hobbies, peregrines, etc. They've only got the one, so they really, really care about it. And, you know, it's a pattern actually that's been followed with this competition and the competition similar one in Australia, that it tends to be the rare endangered birds that get picked, which is brilliant, because they really need all the help they can get.
I mean, how does this translate into conservation outcomes?
Well, New Zealand's very, very good at this kind of thing. You know, they really lead the world in saving their native species. Unfortunately, that often means, and it's something we find quite distasteful over here sometimes, it often means killing the non-native predators, the mammals in particular, that were brought here by Europeans many years ago. But I think they're quite right. You know, they really do need to do this, because otherwise their native creatures and, you know, are in real trouble.
We've seen scandals in previous years, from voter fraud to John Oliver's global Puteke Teke campaign. How important is the international spotlight for a local conservation cause?
Well, I think we've got two things happening here. We've got John Oliver's one, actually, I don't think was a scandal. I think it was great because he picked the bird because it got a great name, I can't even say it, Puteke Teke, and it's a grunting, puking bird with these bizarre mating rituals. Well, that got international publicity and it won, so that's great. Less hilarious was the Australians, and of course it could only be the Australians who decided to vote for one of the species of shag. I think you can guess the reason why that didn't win. There are accusations of Russian interference. You know, even a blooming bird election gets Russian interference, for goodness sake. You know, Trump will probably get in soon. So, there have been scandals.
Only if it means he can feather his nest.
Oh, very good. Yes. But we should be having this here. We should have one here. I have contacted, if there are any newspaper editors listening, get in touch with me, because I would love to run a British Bird of the Year. It would be won by the robin, and then we would bar the robin from future competitions, which is what they did in Australia when things like fairy wrens won every year. They said, OK, you're not allowed to enter if you've won already, which seems fair enough.
But is the robin at risk?
No, it's not particularly, but it is Britain's favourite bird, so it would win the first year, but that's fine. And second year, it could be something like the hen harry. It could be something that is at risk. So, let's go for it. But, I will get on to this. I'm banging on about this all the time, but I can't believe that the Australians and Kiwis do it and we don't.
Oh, absolutely. And finally, just going back to New Zealand, with this falcon set to be celebrated in a new Maori waiata, that's a song, I believe, how do cultural connections shape the way that New Zealanders value and protect their bird life? And could, as you say, that be something we could adapt here?
I think hugely. I mean, a lot of the names, they have an official English name, if you like, New Zealand falcon, and then they have the Maori name, which is great, having both. Now, we actually have a lot of folk names here. We just don't realise we have names like whitethroat or chiffchaff or blackcap. They're all folk names. They were coined hundreds of years ago and then made official. So we don't quite have the same cultural connections, but we do, we probably have the deepest cultural love of birds of any nation on earth, even more than New Zealand, dare I say. So, but good for them for doing this contest. It's a great idea.
And Stephen, finally, what's your favourite bird?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's now I've lived in the countryside in Somerset for 20 years. It used to be the swift, and I converted to the swallow, which I haven't seen. I've probably now seen the very last ones heading off south to South Africa. And that is the bird for me that brings the coming of spring and now the coming of autumn as they disappear.
That was the naturalist and author Stephen Moss speaking to Georgina Godwin on Tuesday's edition of The Globalist. Still to come here on The Curator, the morning show's Karen Pittman explains how things are hotting up in the 4th series. We take to the skies and meet the man responsible for Emirates' wine collection, and we head to Japan to explore the Le 19M Chanel at Tokyo exhibition. Stay tuned.
Craft matters, in small ways, like how a coffee is brewed, and in not so small ways, like how your money is cared for, which is why for 160 years, UBS has elevated banking to a craft, tailoring unique strategies that combine human expertise with the latest technologies, all happening across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the heart of it all. UBS, banking is our craft.
You are with The Curator, our weekly highlight show here on Monocle Radio, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Let's talk wine now on The Curator, as I had the honor of catching up with Oliver Dixon, the man who looks after Emirates' wine collection. Since 2006, the airline has invested over $1 billion into its wine program. Here Oliver tells me more about his job and their impressive champagne collection. Let's have a listen.
I've been in this very envious job, as you call it, for around 15 years now, looking after all of the onboard wines for Emirates, which includes all the purchasing for the wines that will go on board in the future as well as for today. That is a role that evolved something I was doing in Dubai anyway, working for a group company, which is a wine distributor and retailer. So I'd already had an 8-year career with this company, MMI, before I started with Emirates. And that's kind of how I got into it.
One thing that I was surprised reading a bit more about Emirates and their investment in drinks on board, the level of investment, I had no idea. Correct me about the numbers. Is it true that it's over $1 billion since 2022? That's incredible.
The $1 billion is from about sort of 15 years ago. Yeah, but if we look at the value of wines that go on board in a year, if we look to the retail value, it'd be something in the region of £150 million a year just on wine and champagne, which goes across all cabins.
And champagne is a particular focus as well, right?
Champagne's a big focus because it resonates with consumers. People know the big champagne house names and they're very familiar with them, and they associate those names to luxury brands. It's a big part, and it's the first interaction with the wine program itself. So you get on board and you're offered a glass of champagne. And then after takeoff, the first thing that you might have a drink, you're having something vinous, then it would be quite possibly champagne. So champagne's the sort of the introduction to the wine program. So it's quite important to get right. As a result of that, Emirates has got a partnership with the Moet Hennessy company, which has brands Dom Perignon for first class, Moet Chandon, Veuve Clicquot for business class. And then also in premium economy, which is a very new cabin to Emirates, they use exclusively the Chandon sparkling wines, which is a winery in Australia, also owned by the Moet Hennessy company.
And it's interesting, this thing about champagne, because even, I'm talking from a personal experience. When, let's say, if I want to upgrade to business, the first thing I think about it, and I'm not joking, is champagne. Because I know it will be offered, so it is quite a big deal, actually, for an airline, the type of drink that people are consuming, right?
Exactly, and because it says luxury, doesn't it? And premium cabin experience is associated to luxury as well as comfort. I mean, the first thing you think about, some people are wanting the luxury experience, especially if they're on holiday. Some people are wanting the comfort, if they're getting off at the other end and going on to do business and got quite a busy few days at their destination. So it sort of depends for what reason you're traveling, but luxury is kind of at the forefront for a lot of people.
The crew at Emirates, they also have kind of a wine tasting program, and quite a lot of them did that. And I think there are plans to actually even expand this program as well, right?
Yeah, I was looking around the new training facilities just a couple of weeks ago. It's incredibly impressive and a massive step up from where it was a couple of years ago. I had a session with the wine training team. So they have 11 full-time wine trainers at Emirates who've all been through WSET training, which is the Wines and Spirits Education Trust, which is a UK establishment. Takes people up to quite a good level of knowledge and understanding. They then built a program on 3 levels. So there's a course designed for the newcomers, the ab initios, so the new joiners to Emirates. So the cabin crew have to go through that before they go on board. And then if they want to apply for business class, then they have to go through an upgrade version of the wine program. And then the same thing again for first class. So this is a relatively new part of the program, but it's being rolled out at quite a pace. And yes, it will result in most of the cabin crew having a very good understanding about the wines and champagnes that go on board, which is important if you consider how much Emirates is investing into the product itself, because it needs to be explained properly.
One question that is quite interesting. Do you think what we drink on air has to necessarily be different from what we drink on land, if I may say? Do you have to have a think about certain little changes?
Yeah, I do. It's a question we ask ourselves a lot. And actually, at one point, we got the engineering crew together and we said that there's a lot of talk about how the cabin pressure on an aeroplane is different to what you would experience being in your house at, 150 meters above sea level, for example. The conclusion that we came to after talking to them was that there's been so much advancement in technology in engineering, and the cabins are now at a pressure that is equal something like an alpine ski resort. So I ask you the question, if you go skiing, do you order different wines to what you would if you were planning a meal at your own house in any other evening? Not really. You don't think, well, I'm going skiing, I need to have a bottle of Minuti Rosé, preferably in a Magnum. And that's not the reason why people drink Magnums of Minuti in ski resorts. It's more for show and for party. So I don't think really the cabin pressure has a lot to do with it. What I do look for, without fail, every single time, is a nice, strong acidity in a wine. And if it's got a strong acidity, that wine's going to hold up in any environment. So when a wine is too cold, too warm, it's been open a little bit too long, whatever it might be, is going to hold very well. That's sort of good practice anyway for anyone. But then to know that you have to sort of understand a little bit about wine and how acidity sort of shows itself. But yeah, a strong acidity, not a overtly acidic wine with bitterness, and that's not what we're saying, but something with good, strong acidity is very, very helpful.
Oliver Dixon there, speaking to me earlier this week. From luxury drinks to luxury fashion now here on The Curator. On the outskirts of Paris lies an ultra-modern building which is home to a group of experts in some of the world's oldest crafts. Le 19M was created by Chanel after it brought some of France's finest workshops. From lace making to pleats to embroidery, the companies who work at Le 19M are not limited to Chanel, but were arguably guaranteed a future in the long term. Now, Le 19M and the creations that are produced there have gone on tour to Japan. Ryuma Takahashi sent us this report from Tokyo with narration by Fiona Wilson.
A new exhibition, La Galerie du 19M Tokyo, invites visitors to experience the theme of Beyond the Horizon. Overlooking the city skyline from the Mori Art Center Gallery on the 52nd floor of a tower in central Tokyo, it presents a space where Japanese and French craftsmanship intersect and weave together visions of the future. One of the 5 members of the exhibition's editorial committee, the filmmaker Momoko Ando, explains the idea behind the project.
Actually, when this whole exhibition was completed, the first time I went around the exhibition, I've realized it starts from the future to the past. So beyond our horizons, you enter from beyond horizons. What's very special about this exhibition is not only introducing 19M, but collaborating with Japanese craftsmanship. And then you go into L'Usage, 100 years of the Chanel history. I would say one thing would be quality, that we can now like copy and paste everything, but you can't copy and paste if you didn't have the pure essence. Essence is something that you feel. That's why it had to be exhibition.
The exhibition brings together 30 artisans and artists from Japan and France, engaging in a dialogue about the future of craftsmanship and materials. French artist Clara Imbert shared the inspiration she gained from the experience.
I'm a French artist based in Paris. I was invited by the 19M to collaborate with a Japanese artist, Suzuki Moriisa, who's a craftsman working with cast iron. I really think Japan and France, in that sense, we do have this thing that I consider a quality, that is of protecting our crafts. And 19M is really doing that for us in Paris, and it's very important. I think that's very important to continue the traditions, but I think also that traditions can evolve. They do not necessarily need to be that stiff. Suzuki-san, for example, it's usually a traditional thing to pass on the craft from father to son. He learned from his mother, who was the first one of all those generations to kind of decide she wanted to do that and stand up for it. It really moved me as a woman also working, with the craft like metal, which is pretty much male-dominated in general. I thought it was so interesting, because in the end, traditions are so important and they're also made to be challenged once in a while. In this exhibition, you have that challenge in a very positive way.
Thank you to Ryuma and Fiona for that report. Staying on the theme of luxury brands, now as our next highlight comes from the latest edition of Monocle Fashion. This past month has seen a number of high-profile debut collections at fashion weeks across the globe. Monocle's creative director, Richard Spencer-Powell, sat down with fashion director Natalie Teodosi to discuss what the ad campaigns at Dior and Loewe tell us about their newly appointed creative directors.
As soon as I saw the new campaign by Jonathan Anderson, especially knowing that you were a big fan of what he was doing at Loewe with Paris, I wanted to get your take on the new campaign, the new direction, which was quite different, I thought, to what he was doing before, shot by David Sims and featuring the trio of his new ambassadors that he picked, Greta Lee, Mickey Madison and Mia Goth. So what was first reaction when you saw those images?
I think it's quite nice. I was a big fan. I'm a big fan of Anderson's. Loewe work I always felt was so creative, and I'm a fan of Paris, who did so much of that support material. He, I think, over the years has done a lot for print, in-store magazines, fold-out posters, really nice stuff. So I think there's a real trust and belief between that collaboration between him and Paris. I think the new direction is quite slight, I thought, actually. I didn't feel as creative as what they've done before. Very French, I felt. And choosing David Sims is an interesting choice, I thought, because what I saw, it was predominantly still life of bags, so shot in situ in this palace. And obviously Sims is known for his, energetic portrait studio work primarily. He's shot a lot over the years, and in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, he's been very, very prominent. He's featured in a lot of campaigns. A lot of people have used him, but he would not have been my first choice to shoot maybe elegance, and certainly not still life. Not that I'm saying he's done a bad job. It's just I thought that was quite an interesting choice, and interesting this continuation of actresses replacing models, I think, which you see everywhere, and including in, which I know we will talk about, Loewe is all kind of slightly lesser known actors and actresses.
Yeah, I think there's this conversation, especially with Dior, but with all of these designers who are tasked with reviving or finding new directions for this label between past and present, tradition and the future. And it's interesting, that fine balance. And with Dior, Anderson has much bigger budgets, but it's also a bigger house with a lot more expectation. So do you think that it's holding him back in some way, or what direction would you like to see him go into as he develops?
I think I'd like him to play perhaps with the history. I think lots of designers that go into big houses or old houses, there's this sort of phrase, it's from the archive,
Yeah.
We arrived and we went to this incredible archive and we've restored this old logo or this old pattern or this print. You kind of hear that quite a bit. They did that twice at Burberry in the last, 2 makeovers that they did. So I think he's got a hell of a lot of resource material there, I think, and a long history. So there's a lot to be drawn from. But I hope he mixes it up a bit and has some provocations and challenges a little bit, because I think it's a great role he's been given. I mean, I think with someone so creative and clear, with a clear vision of art direction, it's a quiet start, I would say, from my perspective. I would quite like to see him pushing and challenging and turning it on its head a little bit, in a good way, not change for change's sake. And I think nothing wrong with doing it step by step and a bit of a slow build. So good luck to him.
I couldn't agree more. And he said it. He said that building a house and a new chapter will take time, and that's just the beginning. So let's see what he does. And then over to Loewe, where he left on such a high. So I think actually the Proenza Schuler designers who are now joining Loewe and taking on the job have a much harder task, because he had such impact. What did you make of their teaser ahead of the show and the images that they released, which I think surprised everyone? It was a detour from what we're used to from Loewe.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think Loewe, it's a difficult task they've been given there. It's a hard act to follow. Anderson and Loewe is such a darling of the fashion industry. I think everyone likes them. It's a bit like Celine when Phoebe Philo was there. Just absolutely everyone adores them. And they are an interesting brand because they are a fashion house. They sit in Spain, and so it's not where everyone else sits. They have been very, very creative. And I think when I think about Loewe, I think of them primarily as an accessories brand. I think of them as a bags business. And in fact, the store on Bond Street, which I love, and I've shopped a few times, it is primarily an accessories space, I believe. And what's interesting is what this new campaign teaser is. It's very different to what's gone before. So they're obviously making a mark, and without making too obvious a pun, a bit of a splash. Now there's an aquatic theme to this set of images they've released. Very little product on show. 3 actors, actresses that you probably won't know of. I thought quite androgynous, quite homoerotic, a lot of kind of wet skin and water splashing on faces. It reminded me a little bit of some of the older work of Merton Marcus, the photographers. So I think it was an unusual step, or first step. Certainly doesn't feel like a continuation of what had gone on before. Bright, colourful, probably making a lot of noise is quite a good thing, because I think it's shifted it on quite quickly. The conversation is going to move rapidly. And the good thing about fashion, and sometimes to its detriment, is that fashion does move very quickly. It has to reinvent itself twice a year. That's part of the deal. So I think for both houses that these things are going to change quite quickly. So again, in a similar way to Dior, I'm interested to see what happens next. And commercially, as a business, how the public reacts to that.
Monocle's creative director Richard Spencer Powell in conversation with fashion director Natalie Theodosi there. And finally, on today's show, we have a highlight from the Monocle Weekly. This week I was lucky enough to speak with the actress Karen Pittman, who plays top television producer Mia Jordan on Apple TV Plus series The Morning Show, which is currently in its 4th season. Her character plays a big role in the new series. Let's hear more from Karen.
I'm a firm believer in second chances. Maybe this is an opportunity to make it right.
Karen Pittman, welcome to Monocle Radio to talk about The Morning Show, which I am a huge fan, so it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
And 4th season, of course, is in. No spoilers here, but I have to say, your character this season is on fire, literally.
No spoilers.
It's difficult, right? To no spoilers.
It's so hard. It's really hard. Yeah.
How much do you think your character have changed? Because, I mean, there's a lot of growth. There's big changes from Mia Jordan in this season, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mia starts out, when we encounter her in the first season of the morning show, she's, got that self-inflicted wound, having been involved in a workplace romance with Mitch Kessler, who we know has, been taken down through that Me Too movement and this really heroic gesture by Alex and Bradley at the end of the season. And then season 2, we're in COVID. And season 3, we experienced a merger. And during this whole period, Mia has been one of the people at the morning show that has really held it together on behalf of all of the employees. She is a company woman. She is, there for the morning show and taking care of the people there. And at some point in season 4, we see a turn in her where she decides that she is going to be more ruthlessly for herself after having handed herself over to the company. She decided to take herself back. Yeah.
And this is brilliant. I mean, because she does have kind of new alliances in the series as well with characters like Chris, for example, which I thought was fantastic. And it felt quite organic as well, the way she did it.
It is. And it also is, hearkening back to the center of who the character is. Mia ultimately does not change that much, right? She is about what the whole is in her perspective on her work. She is more centered around herself, but she is stepping forward on behalf of this effort that her and Stella decided that they were going to focus on, which was lifting women up as they climbed. And that's really part of what she continues to do in season 4, but we see her do it in a much more callous, probably is the best way to look at her effort, but also definitely more pointed, more ruthless.
And I have to say, her Russian does work her this season. Yeah. I shouldn't say anymore, but I mean,
she speaks no Russian this season. She speaks no Russian this season, but she does play pool.
Which is very important.
I mean,
right?
The writers just keep giving me great things to do. She speaks Russian, she plays pool. I mean, it's a fun character.
One thing I like about the morning show, of course, it does talk about all the topics that we're all discussing right now. AI, Russia, Trump. It's incredible how the writers have their finger on the pulse, for sure. But it's mainly about the characters in a way, because you have all of those in the background, but in the end we want to know how is Mia feeling, how is Alex Bradley feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because I think one of the Billy Crudup and I were interviewing today, and we talked about this, that the plot twists are important and these character arcs are important, but at the center of the morning show from the beginning has been these rich characters. And the plot twists around them. They don't twist around the plot, That's very important because once you become invested, sympathetic to the characters, once you can start to track them as individuals and their journeys, you want to go with them wherever they go. The whole show is this huge adventure. And because we have these great actors on the show, including, as I said, Billy and Shannon Reese, but also Greta, and we have a bunch of new actors on the show, and Aaron Pierre, and Jeremy Irons, and Marion Cotillard. Again, Nicole Bahari. We just keep adding these great actors. So the stories are so rich, the characters are so deep, like you want to follow them from season to season. And I think that's why the morning show has just gotten better. In my opinion, the 4th season is probably the best.
To get what you want, you need to burn the house down. I know what I deserve. And it's my time now.
And I can relate very much to the series as a journalist. I think, you know, everyone interviewing you, because of course we're talking about, you know, a big production here, something that perhaps wouldn't happen in the usual life of a journalist, but there is something, that tension before the show goes live, you know, it is quite realistic in that sense.
Yeah, I think everyone says that to me when we go visit them in television news, no matter where we are. They're always, it's like so authentic. Are you guys behind the scenes here at our show? You know, again, that's just a hallmark of the great writing on the show, that they have their finger on the pulse of what people want to talk about. But also, I think we find that journalism and television journalism is more interesting every day because of this extraordinary cult of personality that now is a part of how we get our news. From whom you receive your news is as important as the news itself. And for many, many decades, removing any kind of personality out of the journalist so that you could present the facts and the information was paramount. That was what we consider journalistic integrity. And so it's fascinating now to see who these people are providing our news, from Rachel Maddow to Megyn Kelly to Piers Morgan. Like, who are these people that are presenting us with the news, and what are they about? What is their take on the news, and how is that influencing how we hear the news? We have this really extraordinary character on the show played by Boyd Holbrook named Bro. He is the Joe Rogan type. He is selling testosterone as part of his podcast show. You know, he's one of those guys that sort of represents a perfect example of what American journalism and American information and news gathering really looks like. And so we're just expanding and exploring all these incredible topics and the characters who are part of it.
The AI plotline was fascinating as well because, you know, as a journalist, and I'm sure you're a journalist, you know, it's kind of scary in a way. Can AI replace our jobs? But as you're saying, you need the voice, you need to trust the journalist. So maybe it will not actually replace the jobs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think there are some areas where AI is not going to be able to infiltrate. But I think the ways that AI is the scariest to me or creates the most worry and concern for me is how dependent we already are on it. I'm talking about how, you know, if you can't remember the name of someone, you just pick up your phone and you type it in. Or if you're late at night feeling sick, unwell, let me just go to Dr. Google or you know, WebMD to find out what's going on. These are the ways that we are more dependent on AI and that sort of mechanism than ever before. And I think that level of seeking information, I think, is one of those areas where we're unaware that we are really dependent upon AI.
And of course, I need to ask you this because you started as you studied music, right?
Yes,
and
right.
opera as well.
Yeah.
And I did see something about that you guys should do a morning show episode, a musical.
Yes.
I'm into that.
Are you into it?
Yeah. Can we make this happen?
You know, to be perfectly frank, my showrunners asked me, Charlotte has asked me, Karen, would you sing this season? So I don't know why or when this came up that I said, yeah, you know, we should do a musical episode. But I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. I don't know what they're planning on the morning show in the future, but we certainly have such strong opinions about whether or not we should or shouldn't do it. I'm sure they're going to turn it around and figure it out.
Maybe it's a bit too much from you, Jordan, speaking Russian, playing pop. I mean, that would be a bit
you know,
too much, right?
You never know.
What language do you speak, by the way, out of curiosity?
A little bit of Spanish, a little bit of French, a little bit of Italian. I know enough to get around, get along, and not embarrass myself. I wish I knew more. I wish I was better at it. My kids have great facility with other languages.
In that case, muitas gracias, Karen.
Oh, gracias. Oh, that's very kind. Thank
Or I'll say in Portuguese, muito obrigado.
To say it again?
Muito obrigado.
Okay, I'm going to let you say that, but yes, you're welcome.
No, it's a pleasure. Love the season. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
People need to feel that UBN is going to have it first, and they're going to have it right.
A nice idea. But it's not sexy.
That was the actress Karen Pittman, star of The Morning Show on Apple TV+. Well, that's all we've got time for this week's edition of The Curator. The show was produced by San Impi and presented by me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Join us again next week to hear some of the very best of the programs here on Monocle Radio. Thanks for listening.